Hey guys, Phil Monteleone, the book peddler here, coming to you with another YouTube video. If you haven't, hope you subscribe to the Book Peddler YouTube channel. You can stay up to date on book picks, in-store, out-store activity, business selling experiences, and informational videos like this one. And before I get started, if these videos take sometimes a long time to make, gotta get my thoughts out on paper, try to present something of decent quality for you guys. If you would like, I have a My Coffee link in the description. Throw me a couple shekels if you would like to buy some books, whatever you want to do. You know, it's not expected, it's appreciated though. If anybody does that, I thank you very much for those who have. And this video was sponsored by one of my subscribers, Highlander. He bought me all this coffee here, so thank you very much, Black Rifle Coffee. And it all goes to a coffee fund in the shop here and in the building I'm working on across the way. So my customers really appreciate it. Thank you, men, for the coffee. So this video is going to be guidelines as to how to go about pricing antiquarian and collectible books. I'd like to say, if you are a seller out there who's seasoned in the field, please feel free to make a comment below if you have little gems and tidbits of information that you'd like to relay over, because I'm sure there's people out here that's going to watch this video. They're just getting into the field, starting to get into it, and I'm trying to make a video that I wish that I had when I first started out. And so if you guys disagree with me on something, whatever, put it in the comments below, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. But anyhow, we can only really go by guidelines. I don't think there's any set way of how you price, but I have these guidelines written down. I got all my notes here, and this is just what I've used in helping to determine value. And there is condition, completeness, state, printing and edition, presentation, desirability. You have rarity and niche markets, market demand, provenance, signatures. There's intrinsic values, historical, societal, cultural value. Then we could talk about speculative markets. This all adds into the formula of how we come up to price our book that we have. With the advent of the computer, we do have a great tool in our box to compare and contrast similar material. I'm not going to get into extensively about these websites. You can look into them yourself, but I have a short list here that I could recommend to you guys. Some of them are subscriber based. I don't subscribe to any website. There's also great reference books out there. I'll be showing you stuff along the video. But I have here WorldCat, Via Libre, Rare Book Hub, there's WorthPoint, there's Live Auctioneers, there's eBay's Advanced button. We can gather records and we can see a history of what books have sold for, and again, do a compare and contrast. Excuse me, guys, but let me see here. Before I get into these guidelines, I will say that the money is in the buying. You have to buy these books right to you know, get a return on them. That's a whole nother video in itself. But throughout this talk, you are gonna, I think they actually kind of go hand in hand in certain senses, because by breaking down the books by these guidelines, we can do the same when we're buying as well, and get the gears cooking as to what is going to make this book desirable to a collector, why you should buy it, and try to come up with a price point of what we should sell it at. So the first one we'll cover here in our pricing guideline is going to be condition. And simply put, we need to look at our book and be able to determine condition. What would devalue that book in a collector's eyes if they were wanting to buy it? So are the contents loose or shaken? Is there smudging or foxing within? Are the corners exposed or sloped? Is the book complete? Are the illustrations present? Are the hinges loose? If you don't know these terms, the book reback, rebound, if you don't know these terms, I would suggest you start with the book. The title's something like the ABCs of Books. I'll link in the description. I should have looked up earlier when I couldn't find my copy of the exact title, but I believe it's called the ABCs of Books. That'll give you a good starting point of rundown of terminology and point out exactly, where this is coming from. A text block, what is that? All these different terms that you need to know. Start there, because you're going to need to learn it. Now, for the inexperienced eye, they might bring in a older book to sell and say, and you're breaking its condition down. They're going, yeah, well, it's old. Yeah, great. That's not the right attitude or way to look at this at all. Collectors want the best copy that they can find, and everything detracts from the value. I'll put it in a little bit of a perspective, like a Julius Erving rookie card, one of my favorite players ever, graded 10, near mint. That card is probably worth about $1,500. Graded a 2 is probably $150, $200 card, something in that range. It's a significant difference we're dealing with here. The only thing is we're not sending out our books to be graded. You're the grader, and you have to properly be able to relay over condition to your buyer. And condition absolutely affects the final number you put on it. The collector's the grader, so it's important. I mean, for a book reference instead of a card reference, if Atlas Shrugged or Catcher in the Rye or any of these things, they don't have their dust jacket, you can expect the value to probably be cut in half, the final value. So completeness is really key too. By the way, guys, all these different metrics I'm using, they're all kind of going to gel together in a way. I'm trying to separate them, but they inevitably come together during this talk. They're going to. So these things can make the differences between thousands of dollars. Like I'll show you, these books here were rebound. Travels Through North America by Isaac Weld. It's 1807. Now, in a way, it's great they're rebound because they're preserving, the meat, right? But they're rebound this contemporary cloth, not in their period state, whether that was like 3/4 leather or full leather. I can't exactly remember. But in its proper state or original states, you're going to be able to most likely get more value out of it. Now, there are things that we're going to talk about that can surpass condition and things like this. It has to do with the contents of the book and certain historical importances, but we'll get there when we get there. Collectors want a complete book, okay? But everything is situational. I'll give you a quick example. Dad bought an Amelia Earhart first edition book for $1 at a garage sale, and I hacked on him. Had everything wrong with it. Beat up, no dust jacket, supposed to come with a record it didn't have, and it was ex-library, right? That book, during that time, sold for, if it was mint and complete, for about $1,200 from what I remember. I sold mine for $200. Great return on my investment, right? Dad tried to squeeze me, but anyhow, could have I got the record and tried to get a jacket and remove stampings and everything? Yeah, that probably would have enhanced the value. But everything is situational, and everybody's situation is different. So sometimes it's best to just make the turn and reinvest it. But just know if the book is incomplete or not. If a book is illustrated with plates, make sure all the plates are there. A Wizard of Oz first edition book missing plates is going to be of lesser value. Sometimes people cannibalize books so you can find individual plates or different things like this, or jackets that you can purchase. Just make sure it's going on the proper book. So this is where the research and study kicks in a bit. And to know what you're looking at in terms of condition, this kind of goes into edition states and printing a little bit here. I'll touch on the Wizard of Oz. I had a Wizard of Oz first edition book. It was in something called Class C binding. It was a little bit of a later binding based on maybe the colors of the letter of the O'Reilly Company on the bottom of the spine. I believe the text was first state text, but the illustrations were second state, which meant that the illustrations change during the next go around of the printing process. I remember the moon in one of the pictures had a frown on it, and maybe in the first state, I think it didn't have a frown. It's things like this that can detract value, and you have to do your research and know what those things are in accordance to your books here, in different variations that the book may come in. But my point being is, even if your book is incomplete, it can still hold value. So just keep that in mind. Now, in our pricing formula, we can take it a little bit farther with condition, and also where was the book, how can it surpass condition and significance. This is where certain things like historical importance, cultural, societal, rarity, provenance, signatures can, in some cases, override the condition. Establishing provenance can determine a more added value. People love stories of where these books have come from, or who may have handled the book. Maybe the book came from the library of Jefferson or Isaac Newton, or famous author like Charles Dickinson. Even if it's a somewhat mundane title, if it was in these figures' libraries, it maybe influenced them in a particular way, or their writings or thought processes. Maybe there's little notations in there. Yes, these are extreme examples, but the longer you're in the book trade, the more interesting stuff does come into play. And if you can establish where these things come from, it does add a desirability to the book. Maybe it came from an early monastery, or it was a ledger from the 1700s from a colonial blacksmith. How do we price that kind of book? Again, we got to compare and contrast material out there. So this is another thing to keep in mind. Even maybe if some of these books have an early schoolhouse book plate, from a one-room schoolhouse that so-and-so went to, and maybe he possibly could have handled that book. I mean, these are things. We can also talk about printing presses. If it was on Benjamin Franklin's printing press, that's most likely going to be worth far more than on Joe Blow's down the street, right? So these are things to keep in mind when pricing our books. There are very small, like, intrinsic things that can really make such huge difference. And one example of this is Adam Weinberger, who is a fellow book dealer, very seasoned one, and a very good one, has a YouTube channel. I caught a YouTube short that he made, and and I wrote this down. It was on the whole book of Psalms. One of them was published in London in 1636, and the other in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 1640. So the London one is valued at most, I think it was a couple $100, maybe a few hundred. I thought it was a couple hundred, he said. The one in Cambridge is valued at $15 million. The books, from what I remember, pretty much look the same, besides this difference. What made that book so much more valuable was that it was the first book printed in British North America. That is ridiculous of a difference there. You would want to jump off a bridge if you made that mistake. I would tie the cinder blocks to you and push you off. So these things can make big differences. You want to do your due diligence and research when pricing these books. Another thing is this. I used to sell antiques. I would always look for things that were different and obscure. If I hadn't seen it, I would buy it. Odd and unique. People love it. Same can go with books too. Scarcity generally can sell. There is a lot of scarce material that's not going to, but you have to extract the value from that book through historical importances and provenances. You can create more of a value, in a sense, of what someone is looking at. If you're a salesman, you got to know it. You got to relay that over to the buyer. And I'll talk about that in a bit later when it comes to maybe possibly specializing in a field as well. But ask yourself, why does a collector want this book? Why do they need this book in their collection? So to recap, we went over condition, and we went over things that can surpass the condition, like the historical aspect and the provenances and so. So now we're going to get into another part of the pricing formula. Now, I just want to add here, when it does come to unique works like ledgers and journals, sometimes these are very one of a kind. Um, Sometimes you might not be able to find your obscure title readily on the computer, but can you find that same author's work or that same publishing company's material and gauge a price point of where a similar work is at? That can help assist. It has helped me before. Takes a little bit of time. And remember, you can always come down too on your pricing, but don't price yourself out of the market, but don't give it away either. Let's get into another aspect of this. This is edition, state, and printing. Awareness is key. You're going to have to know the proper edition of your book. Now, a couple books that I've used to reference in the past and to maybe help you get started as well. Again, sorry, this is reversing the screen. This is called How to Identify and Collect American First Editions, a Guidebook by Jack Tannen. Publishers use different ways to determining their editions. Some will have barcodes. Some will use letters. So this is a book that covers American publishing companies and how to determine what edition, what state printing your book is. With obscure books, again, it's not always the case, but just know there can be corrected text in work. There can be changes in illustrations, formats, bindings, etc. These you have to know before you buy and before you sell it. Again, to relay over the proper information, be as transparent as possible to your buyer. I believe I've told you the story before that I had a first American edition of A Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain. In that book, it was all proper states of bindings and everything like this, but there were it was second state text. There was 3 individual text corrections in that book. Now that book in first state text, and similar to mine, sold for $1,200, $1,400, $1,000. Probably some lower ends, $800, $650, $700 lower, based on their condition stuff. Well, mine sold for $400. That's a dramatic difference on 3 dang text corrections. So you better do your homework and know if it has those in there and provide the relevant information. It can make for big difference on your book. You'll look at a picture maybe on eBay and say, why has he got 200 on his? This guy's got 1,000. Well, maybe there's different text corrections. Maybe it's later states. Know what your book is. Let me see what else I have here. So just be aware that there can be subtle differences in these books. It's hard to know everything all the time. I'm reading a book by, well, you can't know everything. We can try, but we all make mistakes. I'm reading a book by Larry McMurtry, who was a famous book dealer out west, and he wrote like Lonesome Dove and everything. I'm enjoying the book, and it's called like Books of Memoir. Well, he talked about selling a book in there to a dealer for $45. That dealer took and listed it for like $170. Then a dealer from Boston comes along, recognizes what it is, buys it, and he prices his at thousands of dollars. If you know more than the other guy, you're going to have the advantage. So try to soak it all in like a sponge. And use these guidelines to help you price your book properly so that you don't end up like Larry. Even though I've been there, and I know you'll probably be there too if you haven't yet. It most likely is going to happen. Maybe the book is a first edition of a publisher that picked it up later. Does it make it any less valuable? In some cases, yes, but not in every case. Maybe a famous artist was commissioned by that publishing company to do the plates, and someone collects that artist's work, and that copy is just generally more desirable. There's collectors that collect every edition of every variation of book. They want every Alice in Wonderland published and printed, and that's their goal, is to collect them all. It's fun collecting, and so don't always write things off either. If it's not exactly what it's deemed it should be, there can still be great value there. And compare and contrast. When it comes to earlier material without dates, sometimes there's going to have to be some more laborious investigation to be done. Maybe you're not exact as to what time period you're holding. Um, so knowledge as you acquire it when it comes to certain printing processes or bindings. An example is like Victorian book bindings. Some people just collect Victorian book bindings. They're very pleasing to the eye. There'll be a lot of them. There'll be floral designs stamped into the cloth or leather. Sometimes people, Erica Midtown Books was showing me designs on some of his books where certain artists were commissioned to do the designs on the cloth, and people will collect just the presentation. And presentation was one of the things we're talking about, so we'll talk about it now. Presentation is important, and knowing those artists that did that work, having an eye for them. Again though, people will collect just the bindings if it's a pretty binding. What was I gonna say? Dang it. Okay, so if you can't gauge a date of the book, these bindings are like a clear thing. Oh, they did this style during this era, so it's most likely from this era. We can determine. You gotta research. You can't be lazy. The paper's different. 18th century paper, you can feel the difference. They use the different materials, like cloths and stuff. You can feel differences, compared to 19th century or 20th century, I should say. So, this all takes time, and I hope you're not getting overwhelmed if you're new to this, guys, because you're gonna learn as you go. If you don't have a mentor, I didn't have a mentor, but again, soak it in like a sponge. Learn from people who have been in the field and are out there making videos or sharing information. So far we have covered presentation, condition, edition, state printings, provenances. These all play a role in the formula when we're going to price our book. So I want to touch upon the historical, societal, cultural aspects of a book. Okay, what makes this book important? Why has society deemed this work important? Why have people in a specific field of interest deemed a particular work important? Does it have cultural influence? Did it capture a period of time, resonate with people, addresses social upheavals and changes, for better or worse? A book that has progressed forward the minds of men, created cultural shifts. What makes a book desirable in many cases is the perceived importance to a people or individuals. The market is determining desirabilities. Now, I will say this and add a little side note. This is why I think a lot of book dealers also say it's a good idea to specialize in a field. When you specialize in a field and become a professional in that field, where people bring you their books to determine prices, or you are selling to specific collectors in that field, you know why it's a book. There are certain books that they're going to know that are important, that they want in the collection. There's also more obscure types of works, and you could tell them, or you can relate over why this book is important and they need it in their collection to make it complete. This is another thing. So knowing different time frames and what's going on in certain periods, it can greatly assist you. And then compare and contrast, and again, we're bringing in all these other factors like a 3D web when it comes to these guidelines that go into pricing your book. And all I can give you is guidelines here, okay? And talk about those guidelines the best I can. Let me see what else I have here. So if you do specialize in a certain field, I didn't write any of this stuff down. I think I'm kind of done with my notes and thoughts with some of this stuff. If we go into like niche markets and specialized markets and stuff, I have chiropractors in the family, so this is why I'm using this example. But one of the founders of chiropractic care was a guy named Daniel Palmer. He had a son named BJ Palmer, who made even greater advancements and developments in this field, and his work is highly sought after by a specific small niche of people. Familiarize yourself with how his work looks. I know they have green boards, the first editions, not to get into, I guess, too many specifics here, but you might find these books at a library sale that people don't think are worth a dime. and you can pick them up for pennies on dollars. You might find them, though, most likely in a private collection from a past chiropractor. And he may be really excited about this set and he's going to sell them. And you got to know what price to be at. But just know that to know the importance of this work and that you most readily will have buyers lined up for it is the key here. Knowing more than the other guy. Again, if you know more than the other guy, you can make a buck. Where a dealer might pass up those books, they might not have enough insight into who that individual was or care. You can capitalize on them. That's why sometimes you can go into bookshops, and I mean, I've done it, and people probably done it in here. Bought a book for $100 and was able to turn it for $500. It happens all the time. So don't be scared of niche markets. Like maybe when it comes to anthropology, Fraser, what was his name? I forget his first name now. The Golden Bough. It's desirable. If you find the complete set, first states of those books, you can make a real pretty penny on them. I'm trying to think of other examples, but we'll leave it at those two as well. So niche markets is another really good thing where you can extract a lot of value from these books if you know what to look for. When we talk about like speculative markets that I had written down, we can speculate on certain markets. I did a video with Mike Slicker, certain societal things. Maybe there's a movie in Hollywood that comes out, and even if the book was older and if the movie's loosely based on a time period, you can see increases in value. I've always had success and always see the market of occult material and Native American go up. I speculate that early American history is just going to continue to rise. Why? Well, because you have a lot, not to get too political on you, but we have a lot of Jacobins and Marxist mentality going on where they want to destroy our history, tear down this nation's statues, and, change words in books, and, all this kind of nonsense going on, stuff deemed offensive material. Well, maybe you should start picking up more of it and tucking it away a little bit. This stuff may gain in value. I imagine will so because people want to hold on to their history. Those who see it as important will desire it. And if it keeps on a trajectory of getting worse, they'll desire it even more. So value goes up. Hopefully inflation comes down someday. Again, with some of these websites, like the auction sites, we can see the Lewis and Clark value consistently go up of that first edition throughout the years. So, I would say even if that book is priced at what you may perceive to be a high price, if a little bit higher than you would like to spend, okay, we'll try to work a number. But also don't be afraid to buy it either if you can afford it, because you can expect in another 10 years, another 15 years, that's going to continue to rise. So if you have some dry powder and you can stow it away for a bit, you can expect to hopefully extract more from it in later years. Now, I always wondered why some dealers, which I'm not going to name them, but they'll price like above retail. They'll price really, really heavy on their books. Now, I'm sure these guys got a lot of cash in their pockets, and I mean, more power to them. I'm not trying to build a museum. I want to sell my books, but I'm at a different stage of selling. These guys are pretty well seasoned, and again, they have some money in the bank, I'm sure. My buddy, who's a scout out there, book scout, he calls them book narcissists, and I think that's pretty funny, and maybe they are in a sense. Also, maybe their name precedes them. They've built a following. They have a good reputation. So as your reputation grows, they're going to trust you more, possibly, with you getting it right as to what it is or its authenticity of its signatures or whatnot. Trust is a big thing with this. And they might rather spend, if a collector has a bunch of money, they might rather spend with you and be more assured of what they're getting than the other guy, right? That's what I think anyhow, or justify it maybe in a sense. So basically there are markets that we can speculate on. I'm just going to reiterate our guidelines here. I try to give you just a skeleton of what myself as a bookseller for the last, 8 years now, still a pup, but I've learned a ton. And these are just the things I look for: condition and completeness of a book, the state, printing, and edition, the importance of presentation, the desirability of a book on the market. I covered some about rarity niche markets, the demand of a book, provenances and signatures, intrinsic historical, societal, and cultural value, and speculative markets. These all kind of play into a formula as to determining a value of your book. And then the work has to be done. You have to compare and contrast, extract out value from that book, bring it to the light. What makes your book desirable to a buyer? Why is it desirable? So ask yourself questions. Be critical. And I mean, I wish you the best of luck when it's coming to pricing rare and collectible books. Some of them are more straightforward than others. But either way you cut it, if this is a business you want to make or a hobby, you got to be transparent, and you have to do your due diligence of research. And it does require some patience and the ability to know how to research. So use the books I suggested. Keep up the good work. Keep up the studying. And yeah, guys, I think that's all I got to say. I always feel like on these videos that I wish I said something more, said something different. They're not perfect videos, but I'm doing the best I can for you guys. And I appreciate your support out there. If you're still watching, hit the like button if you would like. And consider donating a little bit of coffee to your boy, because I'm up very late making this video. But I love you guys. I wish you the best out there. So till next time, see you later.